Agirl stood frozen in the quiet darkness as the widow's spirit vanished into the wind, leaving only the echo of her warning behind. Her heart thumped painfully. She had been so certain, so convinced that the cloth she took belonged to Soji. She even remembered seeing him wear that exact boxer on several occasions. How could the spirit reject it? How could the flames refuse to catch? Fear slowly crawled up her spine as she remained alone behind the abandoned hut. The night felt heavier than usual, the air colder. She kept hearing the widow's voice repeating the ultimatum in her head, one day, only one day. Agirl tightened her arms around herself. She felt foolish, confused, and strangely embarrassed. But above all, she felt afraid. If she didn't find the right item or the true name before the 24 hours passed, she knew the spirit would come for her, and this time, nothing would save her. She hurried back into the hut, pacing in circles, whispering to herself. Soji Onaru. Soji Onaru, if that's not his full name, then what is? The more she thought about it, the more she realized she had never heard Soji's real full name. People in the village called him Soji, but was that truly his full name or just a nickname? And Onairo, that was simply his father's compound name. That didn't guarantee it was his spiritual name. Agirl felt her stomach twist. She had risked everything, entered a covenant she barely understood, changed her face, changed her identity, traveled across cities, all to secure her future and protect her child. Now everything hung on a name she didn't even know. She lay on the cold clay floor of the hut, restless and unable to sleep. The seconds dragged. The night refused to end. Every time the wind shook the dry roof, Agirl jumped, thinking the spirit had returned for her. Before dawn, she finally got up and walked to the small stream behind the hut, splashing water on her face to steady herself. She knew what she needed to do. If she wanted this sacrifice to work, she had to know Soji's real name. Not the name villagers shouted when insulting him. Not the nickname young girls whispered when flirting with him. She needed the name he was born with, the one the spirits would recognize. The sun slowly rose as she left the hut again, walking toward the village like a shadow moving with purpose. Down in the village square, early risers were sweeping their compounds, some roasting yam for breakfast, others fetching water. No one looked at her twice, her new face protected her. Her new identity made her invisible in plain sight. She walked past Mama Put's restaurant again. Mama Put was bent over a large pot of stew, fanning the firewood, her wrapper tied tightly around her broad waist. Agirl's chest tightened. Her own mother, yet she had to walk past her like a stranger. She swallowed hard and kept moving. She needed Soji, and she needed him today. As she approached Soji's house, she noticed movement at the corner of the compound. Soji was limping out of his room, still bearing the wounds from the beating the youths had given him. His face looked swollen, his lower lip cracked, and he moved with a painful stagger. He looked miserable. Broken. Lost. He hadn't slept. It was written all over him. Agirl hid behind the mango tree near the house, studying him. She had to speak with him again, but this time, she needed to guide the conversation carefully, cleverly, without rushing. She had to make him reveal his true birth name without suspecting anything. Soji sighed heavily as he lowered himself onto a wooden stool outside, rubbing his forehead with frustration. Agirl stepped out slowly from behind the tree, pretending to be surprised to see him. "Oh, you're awake this early," she said softly, her new voice calm and gentle. Soji looked up, immediately brightening at the sight of her. "Oh, you came back," he said with relief. "I didn't think you'd keep your word." She smiled faintly. "I like keeping my promises. I told you I'd return." Soji scratched the side of his head shyly. "I didn't even hear you coming. I was, thinking about something." Agirl tilted her head slightly. "You look worried. Are you okay?" Soji hesitated, suddenly emotional, but tried to hide it. "It's nothing, personal issue," he muttered. Agirl stepped closer, her voice gentle and sympathetic. "You can talk to me. I'm a stranger, sometimes it's easier to tell a stranger your burdens." Soji swallowed, glancing away. "It's about someone who disappeared," he finally confessed. Agirl forced herself not to break character. "Oh, that's sad. Someone close to you?" Soji nodded slowly. "Yes, too close." Agirl sat beside him, pretending not to know anything. "I'm sorry. What's the person's name?" Soji stared into the air, his voice trembling slightly. "Her name was Agirl." Agirl kept a straight face, listening. "She lived with me," he continued, "but I didn't treat her right. Now she's gone, and everybody thinks I killed her." Agirl let him talk. "What about you?" she asked. "What's your own full name? Maybe I've heard of your family." Soji blinked, surprised by the question. "My name," he repeated. Agirl nodded innocently. "Yes now, or do you think I'm planning to use your name to do something?" She laughed lightly to make it seem harmless. Soji finally relaxed and smiled. "My full name is Olasoji Aditanji, but most people in the village call me Soji Onaru because Onaru is my father's compound name." Agirl's heart gave a silent jump. Olasoji Aditanji. That was the real name the spirit needed. She smiled warmly at him, covering her excitement. "What a nice name," she said softly. Soji blushed slightly, flattered. Agirl stayed a little longer, talking casually, laughing gently, acting like a normal visitor. But inside her mind, everything was moving fast, calculating. She now had the true name. Everything was finally falling into place. When she left his house, she walked calmly until she reached the edge of the bush path, then she broke into a quiet run straight toward the abandoned hut. Night was approaching. She didn't have much time left. The spirit had said one day. Tonight was the deadline. Agirl entered the hut, grabbed the boxed item she had stolen, and held it tightly, her breath trembling. She whispered Soji's true name under her breath just to be certain she wouldn't forget. "Olasoji Aditanji. Olasoji Aditanji." When darkness finally fell, she stepped outside toward the shallow grave behind the hut. The wind carried whispers again. The trees swayed violently though the night was calm. A cold presence filled the air. Agirl stood before the grave and called softly. "I have returned." The ground trembled. The spirit began to rise. And Agirl held the boxer firmly in her hand, her voice steady. "I know the real name now." The night was heavy, too heavy for breath. The air around the abandoned hut of the late widow felt thicker than normal, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath, watching Agirl fail for the second time. Agirl stood before the shallow grave again, clutching the boxer she had stolen from Soji's wire. Her palms were shaking, her heart beating like an organ drum at festival time. She whispered, "Widow. I am here again, accept this one." The wind changed direction, the shadows gathered. The old widow's spirit rose slowly from behind the grave, her face floating like pale smoke, her voice cracked like broken calabash. "Drop it." Agirl dropped the boxer quickly. "Name?" "Soji Onaru," Agirl replied bravely. The widow's spirit chanted the name 7 times, her voice shaking the dried grass around them. She blew hot fire from her mouth again toward the boxer. But the fire went out mid-air. Nothing burned. Nothing changed. Agirl froze. The widow's spirit roared in anger, "This name does not belong to the owner of this cloth. You lie. You deceive. There is no connection." Agirl jumped back in fear. I'm not lying. I took it from Soji's compound, I swear." The spirit hissed and vanished violently, leaving the place colder than before. Agirl stood alone, confused, afraid, disappointed. Another failed night. Another rejection. Another reminder that the ritual was deeper than she understood. Frustrated, agirl left the hut and decided to take one more risk. She walked quietly towards Soji's house, hoping to see him again. But instead, she met a different man at the door, Soji's younger brother. He was friendly, gentle, and unaware of the storm agirl carried in her chest. "Oh, welcome," he said. "Are you my brother's friend?" "He's sleeping, he's been in pain." Agirl forced a smile and followed him inside. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on some clothes folded neatly on a chair. Her heart stopped. There. She recognized one. The exact boxer she had stolen. But the brother smiled casually and said, "Oh, this one. It's mine. Oh. I lost it since last week. I've been looking for it." A girl's head spun. It was never Soji's. That was why the spirit rejected it. That was why the fire refused to burn. That was why the night failed. She had been trying to sacrifice the wrong soul. And worse, she now realized the widow spirit wasn't only asking for any name. She wanted real human blood, real connection, real life. She wanted to return from the dead and punish the whole community that mistreated her while alive. The pot of gold, the chanting, the promises. It was all a trap. A girl swallowed hard. But she pretended not to react, and asked innocently, "What is your full name?" The brother told her. And in that moment, Soji, who had been lying inside, overheard her voice. Something wasn't right. Something about this strange girl felt familiar. She had asked him about his brother's name earlier. Now she was asking his brother directly. Why? What did she want? Who exactly was she? And why was she always walking around the abandoned hut? Why did he always hear stories about a mysterious new girl roaming the lonely bush paths? His heart raced. Suspicion took over. He watched a girl leave the compound, pretending to walk normally. But Soji couldn't rest. That night, quietly, he followed her, limping, weak, but determined. A girl reached the abandoned hut. She waited, then knelt before the shallow grave again. She brought out the same boxer. But unknown to her, Soji was hiding behind one of the broken mud walls of the hut, watching her every move. His eyes grew wide. "That is my brother's missing boxer," he whispered to himself. "Why is this girl holding it? What is happening?" A girl called the widow spirit again. "Widow. I have returned, take this one." But the spirit refused to appear. She sensed another presence. The air turned cold. A girl panicked. Then, Soji stepped out of the shadows. "Who are you?" he shouted. His voice echoed into the night. A girl's body stiffened. Soji limped closer, pointing at the boxer in her hand. "Why do you have my brother's underwear? Why were you asking for his full name? What are you trying to do?" A girl stepped back, trembling. Soji's voice grew louder. "Are you doing ritual? Are you the one bringing strange spirits to this village? Speak now before I shout and gather the entire community." A girl burst into panic. And she ran. Soji chased her with everything left in him. But she disappeared into the bushes. The next morning, the village in chaos. Before sunrise, Soji arrived at the paramount ruler's house, sweating, shaking. "I have seen a girl," he announced. "But she looks different. She is no longer the same girl, she has changed her face. She is doing something strange near the abandoned hut." Some villagers gasped. Some nodded, remembering the mysterious unfamiliar girl who had been walking around the lonely paths. The ruler ordered a village-wide search. Youth groups spread into the bushes. The women gathered at the village square. Mama Put ran barefoot, fear shaking her voice. A girl's father arrived breathless, confused. Soon, the entire village was chanting. Search the corners. Search the streams. Search the huts. Bring her out alive. A girl hid inside the bush, trapped, confused, scared. She didn't know how to escape. But the youths found her. The square was full of voices and dust. People pressed shoulder to shoulder, eyes sharp with accusation, tongues sharpened with old hurts. When the youths dragged the girl in, she looked smaller than the memory anyone had of her, a frightened woman in torn cloth, hair matted, urine-sick on her hem, shivering as if the night itself had followed her into the day. Mothers turned their faces away, some men spat, a child began to cry. "How can this be a girl?" someone whispered. "She is leaking like a child. She is not the same." A shout rose, rough and ugly, "Kill her. She must be evil." An old man tried to silence them, but habit and fear were louder. Soji stood with his hand raised, jaw tight. "If this is a girl," he said, voice raw, "then I am free. I should decide what happens to her." The crowd answered him before they thought. "Yes," came the chant, and the square leaned toward a punishment already imagined. A horn blared. A small city car slipped between two rows of anxious onlookers and stopped with an impatient squeal. The doctor stepped out, his shirt dust-smudged but his posture unbowed. He pushed through the crowd with a steady calm that made people hush. "Where is she?" he asked, not waiting for the pointing fingers to find her. His voice had the low certainty of someone who had loved and worried through sleepless nights. They presented a girl to him like an offering. He did not flinch when he saw her state. If anything, the sight drew gentleness into his face. He swept up his scarf and knelt. "A girl," he said softly, the name clean and true in his mouth, "It's me." She flinched at the voice, then relaxed. Recognition trembled across her features like a first warm rain. He touched her hand, then looked up at the crowd. "You will not do this," he said. "You will not let fear decide a woman's life." A murmur. A man spat that she had tried to harm his sons. Another said she had magic. Voices tangled. The doctor did not shout back. He spoke steady and precise, words that cut more sharply than accusation because they held truth. "You gave her away to men who promised her a life. You refused to listen when she was broken. You mocked her when she leaked. You turned a child into history and then blamed her for what men did to her." He glanced at Soji. He did not marry a partner, he married silence and left her to rot. "You call that justice?" Faces changed slowly under that weight. Some lowered their eyes, some covered their mouths. Mama sank to her knees and made a small, ragged sound, a mixture of shame and grief. A girl's father's hands shook as he folded them together. The doctor did not stop there. He spoke of small, practical things like a man who knows the field he will till. He reminded them that this was a village where children are supposed to be protected, where elders teach and where wounds are bound, not buried. He told them quietly how a girl had been brave enough to travel for surgery, how she had trusted a stranger when she had no one else, and how the community had failed the very person it should have held. When some tried to argue that a girl had attempted a ritual, he answered with the single steady fact of their own cruelty. "If she once used the pot you left buried and cursed, who first put that pot in the world? The spirit's wrath is the echo of your neglect." His words landed like stones, the sound built and then settled. A slow, thick shame spread. Men who had been loud fell silent. Mothers wept out their scalding regret. Soji's chest heaved, his face went pale as raw guilt unfurled inside him. At last the paramount ruler rose and spoke with a voice that had counsel in it. He asked the crowd to bow their heads, to consider, to forgive. One by one the villagers moved from rage to contrition. People stepped forward and fell to their knees before a girl, begging forgiveness in stammered phrases. Soji stumbled, then dropped to his knees as well, the hard man undone by his own hands. The doctor stayed by a girl's side through the night, wrapping her in a clean blanket and tending to her wounds. He refused to take the bride price. Instead, at dawn, he returned it to the village elders and laid a new vow that he would take Agirl back to the city not as a trophy but as a partner. He promised care, protection, and a life where she could breathe without hiding. Agirl wept, but this time the tears tasted like relief. The elders and seers convened and decided to make right what the village had allowed to go wrong. They carried rams and goats to the widow's hut. They brought kola and palm oil and salt. Under the banyan tree the seer spoke in low, steady tones, words of release learned from long lifetimes of tending restless spirits. They poured libations, they sang old songs, they beat the talking drum until the sound seemed to knit the fabric of the forest back together. The widow spirit, slow with centuries of anger, finally answered the call to be freed. The grave that had whispered for pain now received peace. As the smoke cleared and the last chant fell away, the elders presented Agirl with a deed, the patch of land surrounding the widow's hut, the river bend, and the path that led to the stream. "Plant your home," they said. "Make of this place a shelter." The doctor nodded and promised to build where the hut had been worst. Months later, with gold sewed and plans drawn, the doctor returned with workmen, bricks, and a vision. On the land given to Agirl rose a hospital with wide, open wards and a small clinic wing for surgery. Beside it, a human rights office opened doors where women could speak without fear. A training room, a daycare, and a small library were carved into the compound. Agirl lent her name, her presence, and her hard-won compassion to the place. She oversaw free treatments for girls needing reconstructive surgery, shelters for those fleeing forced unions, and counseling for men and women who had harmed or been harmed. Soji, who had once swaggered through the market and owned no shame, now came to help with small tasks. His hands mended fences in quiet contrition. He volunteered at the hospital cleanup, white-faced with lessons learned. Some villagers stayed away, others came to help build what their neglect had torn down. Agirl and the doctor married quietly under a wooden pergola near the stream. Mama put cried salt tears into her wrapper as she tied their knot. They worked hard, the doctor tended patients and trained staff. Agirl founded a refuge and gave public talks about protection, dignity, and the quiet courage it takes to survive. The land that once held death now sheltered laughter and babies and the steady clink of life being repaired. When the widow's old pot was finally buried deeper than any curse could reach, Agirl walked to the grave alone, laid a small wreath, and whispered a forgiveness she had for herself as much as for the dead. The pot remained there, but its shadow no longer chased the living. Years rolled on. The hospital healed hundreds. The Human Rights Office rescued many, and the story of Agirl, the child who had been lost and then found, became the reason a village learned to stand for its own. She kept one small gold coin in a wooden box on her bedside table, not as treasure, but as reminder, every wound can be a doorway if a hand will tend it. They did not live a fairy tale life free from grief. They lived instead with the honest weight of people who had rebuilt themselves. Agirl's name, now spoken without shame, carried into the town markets and into the hearts of those she helped. The doctor grew older, his hair silvering, and he never stopped carrying the baby he and Agirl had raised together when they slept in the early days. The village learned to look after its children. Mama put open an extra pot at the restaurant for girls who came in tired from work. Agirl's father found work helping run the hospital grounds. Soji, quieter now, walked the path to the stream with a steady gait and a softer voice. And on clear mornings, when the sun struck the hospital windows and the drums of the village rose to welcome a new day, Agirl would stand at the gate and watch people enter for treatment, their faces pale with hope. She had finally built from the ruins a place that no one could take from her, not man, not spirit, not shame. Her story closed on the wall of children laughing under the mango tree, the doctor's hand in hers, and the knowledge that a life saved from silence could become the voice that saves others.